Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo. This week I continue on with the bathroom remodel project. I construct a base for the new electric flush toilet and I get that base installed. I also make templates of all the walls so I can cut out the dairy board panels and hopefully get them affixed. I haven't done that yet, but I hope I can get that done by Friday when this video comes out. So I guess we might as well go ahead and get right into it. Grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. Here is the base that I constructed for the new toilet, and it was a little bit difficult to work out. You can see that it does curve both from side to side and front to back. It is mounted on the outer hull, so it was a little tricky to get all of the angles correct. And I did just make it out of normal plywood. It's going to be completely encased in fiberglass, so I wasn't worried about it getting wet at all and deteriorating. Now you will notice a couple of the cuts are a little janky. But I am going to embed it and attach it to the hull with 3M 5200. That is a permanent bond adhesive, so that'll fill in any of those little gaps. You know, just dry fitting it. It came in contact with the hull at approximately 85% of all of the points around the base. And any little gaps that were there would be filled with that 5200, so I wasn't worried about it. And after the 5200 dried, I did plan on fiberglassing it to the hull as well. So it should be more than, I'm going to reinforce this base, but as far as being in place on the hull, I'm not worried about it moving around at all. Epoxy is a binary liquid, so it does take two liquids that you mix together. One is a resin and one is a hardener. And the hardeners come in a couple different varieties. They're slow, medium, and fast, and that all depends on how long you want the epoxy to be workable and at what temperature you're going to be applying it. In the past, I've always gone with West System. Now, West System is well known in the boating industry. It's been used forever. It's a high quality epoxy. And when we did structural repairs to El Jaleo, when I fixed the hull, I used West System because I knew there would be no problems and it would work. For this project, I decided to try out US Composites thin epoxy system. And the thin epoxy is what they recommend for laying up fiberglass cloth, which is what I'm going to be doing on this project. So the reason I just wanted to try US Composites is the price point is so much better. When I bought my first gallon of West System resin, just the resin, not the hardener, was 4 years ago, and it was right around $95 a gallon. If you buy it now, just for 1 gallon of resin for West System is around $190. So it's doubled in price in the last 4 years, and that's just for the 1 gallon of the resin, not including the hardener. And the volume between the resin and the hardener is only going to be about 5 quarts total. Now with the US Composite system, I went with their 2-to-1 thin hardener because I wanted maximum working time, and the pot time on that, or the time that it's workable, was around 40 minutes. And I didn't care how long it would take to dry. I just wanted time to work because I didn't know exactly how all this was going to play out, so maximum workability is what I wanted to go with. And the price point was so much better. I got a combined 3 gallons of the resin and the hardener together for less than the cost of 1 gallon of just the resin for the West System. So that's why, and since it was non-structural, I thought it would be a good opportunity to check it out and see how it performed. I did end up epoxying the bolts to the underside of the new base. So when I attached the new base of the toilet to the new toilet base, I don't know that I can keep this straight. The reason why I had to epoxy them in right away was because on the back side where that new base met the hull, there wouldn't be enough clearance for me to get a bolt in long enough that I would need to attach the new toilet base to the new base of the toilet. So I knew I had to do that first. Now, if you see me lollygagging here when I'm putting in these horizontal supports, it's because I'm really trying to think this through. Normally, I'm a trial and error person. I'll mess stuff up and then go back and fix it once I've learned what I've done wrong. And I knew I couldn't do that this time. So I work best when I can tinker around and when failure doesn't really matter. Because then I'll just jump right in and fail and figure out what's wrong. You know, that's kind of the way I operate. But I knew I was only going to have one shot at this. So This was foreign territory for me, and I tried to really go slowly and think everything through. You'll see me putting the base on multiple times just to make sure that all of the bolts that I was putting into the supports would miss the base of the toilet. So it was a little bit of an uncomfortable scenario for me, but you know, it is what it is. Since the horizontal supports that I installed were just galvanized steel, they were not stainless, I did decide to put a layer of fiberglass over them. Even though the entire base itself was going to be fiberglass to the hull, I figured it would just be an extra layer of protection. I certainly didn't want to have to cut this thing out in 5 years and replace it if the supports had corroded. And just a quick note on fiberglassing. If you have never done it before, don't be afraid of it. It is not that difficult. Pretty much any dolt, myself included, can fiberglass. Now there are some things, obviously a lot of people could comment on the shots that I've shown of this fiberglassing and say I'm doing it completely wrong, and yeah, you're correct. I am not doing it very well, but this is not structural, so I'm not worried about every little air bubble or every air pocket or having it be perfect. I'm not a perfect person. I don't do anything perfectly. But when we did fix the hull, Matt and I, we did do it perfectly. So there are tools that you can buy, rollers and whatnot, to get every air bubble out. And I assure you, when we did structural stuff that had to have structural integrity, we did do it properly. And we were worried about a mean blush. I'm not worried about a mean blush here. So this, if someone saw this, they'd probably be pulling their hair out, saying, what in the hell are you doing? You're doing this all wrong. And yeah, this is not structural. I'm not worried about it. So relax. That having been said, if you've never fiberglassed before, just do a little bit of research. It is not difficult, and don't let it intimidate you. It is really easy to do. I fixed the hull. It was the first fiberglassing, or I should say Matt and I fixed the hull. After we hit the jetty at Reedy Point, and yeah, that night was just a nightmare. If you haven't, that was one of the first episodes we put out. That was our trip from New York to Delaware City just after we bought the boat. It was the only chart that I was missing, and we assumed something. It was 2 in the morning. It was pouring rain. We were right by the nuclear power plant, and we made a mistake, and it was a costly mistake, but thankfully we didn't lose the boat. But anyway, we covered that way back in season 1, so anyway, so we won't get into that. But thankfully I haven't hit anything like that again. I have a much better nav program now. But anyway, don't let fiberglassing intimidate you if you've never done it before. Like a lot of these things, don't be afraid to fail, and just try it. Try it out on a small piece of wood or whatever you're trying to form to. Just tinker around with it a little bit. Cut out a couple of pieces, saturate the cloth, see how it hardens up. And whatever resin you're doing, the presence of an amine blush can form, depending upon the humidity and the dew point and what kind of hardener you're using and what temperature it's at. So, if you're worried about that kind of stuff, if you're doing something structural, just do a couple of test pieces on something, on a dummy piece, and see what happens, And don't let it intimidate you. It's not hard. It's just like painting. I just use a chip brush. You make sure you saturate the cloth. It turns from like this white to a translucent when you've saturated it with epoxy. And if it is structural, get all the air bubbles out. It's really not that difficult, and don't let it intimidate you. Here you can see me epoxying the new base to the hull. Now there was one step before this which I didn't film, and that was actually affixing the base in place. I used a 3M 5200. It comes out like a caulk. It looks like a caulk, but it's actually a permanent bond adhesive. So any of those little imperfections that I had when cutting out the base, to make sure it contacted the entire hull, it would fill any of those little voids, and it dries rock hard, and it's a permanent bond. So you can see a little white along the hull there. That's actually that 5200, which is, like I said, it's like a caulk-like material. And I did caulk that the day before and allowed it to dry before doing my first layer of fiberglass. I did paint the entire area with an epoxy paint. It is a Total Boat bilge paint, and this is the third nastiest thing I've ever smelled in my life. I think the first would have to be sodium bisulfite. That stuff will absolutely take your breath away for a week. Second is ammonia, and third is this stuff. And this was absolutely horrific smelling. Now, I did buy a respirator meant for things with VOCs, volatile organics, and it helped out immensely. At first, when I was using the respirator, I thought, oh man, I can still kind of smell this. This thing isn't working. But then when I took the respirator off, I'm like, holy crap, that thing was really working. When I got done painting I painted a bunch of cubby hole or storage compartments, cubby holes with this bilge paint, and it was just horrific. And I had to leave immediately after I got done painting and took the respirator off because it was just awful. Now, this is the first coat. It doesn't look great after the first coat. I did apply a second coat. Turned out a lot better. And, you could say I did give it a light sanding. I could have sanded down some of the ridges where the old cabinet was and stuff. But you know what? It's going to be behind the toilet. You're never going to see it. And I'm not, like I said before, I'm not a perfectionist. I have never strove for excellence once that I can think of in my life. And that might be a sad commentary on me. But, I think it's, I don't know. I don't know if it's a healthy way to live or not. I guess I have no opinion on that. To turn this room into a shower, I'm going to be covering all the walls with what I've always called dairy board. But I guess technically it's called a fiberglass reinforced panel. It's only about 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's basically a sheet of plastic, and it's impervious to water, so it makes it a good material for this kind of an application. Now, I wouldn't, even though the fiberglass panels are flexible, I wouldn't be able to get one inside of this tiny room. As you can see, I can barely fit in there. So what I decided to do was get a roll of paper and to trace out each of the walls, cut out, with an X-Acto knife, and make a paper template for each of the walls. And that would at least give me a starting point. I think I'll cut each of the panels a little bit larger than what this paper template will be, because I know there will be some variances. And the sheets are quite expensive. They're like $45 a piece. So, especially on the bigger walls, I don't want to trash an entire sheet if I cut, a wall a little bit wrong. So I think I'll cut them a little bit large, bring them in, dry fit them, make some tweaks, and then, once I get it set, then I'll go ahead and glue it in place. And that's all we have time for this week. I would like to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew. Without your guys' support, I wouldn't make these videos. And my Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, Matthew Spotton, Peter Allen, and Natalie Linehan. Thank you guys so very much. Your support really means the world to me. I do have one legacy patron member, and her name is Joan Linbo. Unfortunately, she has passed on, but she lives on in our hearts forever. We really miss you, Joan. If you are interested in joining our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that'll take you to our Patreon page where you can sign up. And there are hundreds, literally hundreds of extra videos and photos of our travels, and I try and keep everything there up to date and post at least once or twice a week, so it gives you a little peek behind the curtain. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That'll help us out more than you'll ever know, and that actually doesn't cost you anything, so hit that like button. Alrighty, I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week.